to see all that I can be. Moving on. So we are back. Thank you all, as always, for joining Move Beyond the Block for this episode. I am excited by this. Excitement is not really the word. Excitement is all frantic, right? Frenetic kind of energy. This is a more of a just a feeling of reverence and awe. This conversation that I know will enlighten so many, and I believe will do wonders for the archival footprint of Black women. And I'm so excited by this woman's work ever since I met her. And y'all know I love to give you all the backstory. And so the backstory is in Chicago, there were these Black women library um, free library events and things that were happening. And I was invited to present. And I don't know who invited me to present, but that person wasn't there. They weren't the person that I met when I came in. I was running late. It was my own frantic energy as usual. But the woman who greeted me just was this tall, statuesque, beautiful Black woman. Uh, and her spirit was just amazing. And I was just in awe at what she had put together. Again, it was the Free Black Library, and it was
Black
a
laughter, yeah.
Free Black Women's Library, and it's just a day of everything I love about Black women's literature, Black women's history, dope Black sisters in a space. It was amazing. And then from there, I just started following her and doing everything, whatever she was, and doing just admiring her work. Yeah, I'm talking about none other than Essence McDowell. She is amazing. She is a communication strategist. These are the things, these are the titles, right, that we earn because of our work. So the titles that she holds is communication strategist, organizer, and co-author of Lifting as They Climb, mapping a history of Black women on Chicago's South Side. She started out her career as a budding journalist, and she wrote for national newspapers like the Daytona Beach News Journal.
You fell all the way back. Okay.
Yeah, this the bio, right? This the bio. And we're gonna come back to this Daytona Beach News Journal because that's put a pin in that. She also wrote for the Afro American in DC. That's Washington, D.C., that is. And then in print media, she transitioned into digital sphere. And that's when she obtained her master's degree in journalism and new media from DePaul University. So y'all know she's very smart. As her passion for digital communications expanded, she took on projects for state and local organizations. Essence worked with the Illinois Humanities Council to create online platform to connect local communities through conversations on social justice topics. She also took on web development for the Illinois Capital Forum, a program that brings students together to engage in project-based learning within the humanities in 2013. And she did all of this, y'all. Look, this is
This is my old bio. My bio from back in the
decade
day.
ago. It's getting to the other stuff too, but I always people like to rush through folks' bio because they feel like time. But I just think that, and I'm gonna get to the rest of the bio. I just think it's important for us to one document and hold space for the things and the spaces and places that we've been, because I'm sure each one of these spaces was a learning place for you, and also a space that really guided you to where you are now. So y'all bear with us and get all this goodness, get this back. It might inspire somebody to go back to school for their masters or something. So next up in 2013, she joined the Social Justice Initiative at University of Illinois in Chicago, and I think that's around the time I met you at University of Illinois in Chicago as the media coordinator and digital art activist for the Freedom Dreams Freedom Now conference. Essence went on to work as communications coordinator for the Chicago Torture Justice Memorials, national media coordinator for Insights Color of Violence 4 conference, and community engagement manager with Chicago's Gallery 400. She has also been a part of multiple Chicago-based community organizations, Black Youth Project, Love and Protect, All African People's Revolutionaries, Bridging While Black. She's also served on the Chicago Freedom School Board of the board of Chicago Freedom School. For the past 3 years, Essence has joined forces, and this is not the past 3 years because this would have been way back, probably 2017 or 16 or something. Essence joined forces with a small group of women to organize Free Black Women's Library. She also works with A Long Walk Home, another dope girl-centered organization here in Chicago. As part of her ongoing dedication to building resources for Black women and girls, Essence is working to develop a Chicago-based hub called Black Women's Organizing Collective. We'll talk about that, BWOC. And in 2018, Essence and organizer Mariam Kaba published the book, Lifting as They Climbed, as a project to uplift the untold stories of Black women in Chicago. The guidebook was a success and has been in its second edition. Next up, they released under Haymarket Publishing. They extended the guidebook to include Black women's legacies and landmarks, not just on the South Side, but also the West Side of Chicago. And that came at such a pivotal time for us during the pandemic, or just about. Essence currently, I don't know if this is accurate or not, so I won't go into that. I'll let you share the work you're currently doing, but I wanted to just sit with that bio and hold space for you because the work you do and telling the stories of other women. Just imagine if when you did that work and you told the stories of, let's say, Ida B. Wells or Mamie Till Mobley, if you skipped over any of their important work, right? Like all of them matters. And so welcome, Essence.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I haven't heard that bio in a long time, and it's actually really supportive right now to reflect back on over a decade of work and creativity and just really being some of my skills and passions and being able to reflect back on how they have contributed to where I am now. And so thank you for reading that. Thank you for reminding me of all the things that I came through in order to get here to this moment.
Yes, and what I didn't state, because we're going to talk about it a little more, is that guidebook. Yes, it went on to be expanded into other women from across the city of Chicago. But not only that, you are now a filmmaker, director of a documentary that's been getting critical acclaim and fascinating people. And now you've started not just doing the guidebook, but actually doing tours with the guidebook. So there's so much more that I didn't touch on, that bio needs to be updated to include the rest of your work, your fabulous work. So tell me about that. Like, when you think about the work you do around Black history, and as your bio said, it's not just in academic settings, right? You're not learning these things because, it's for some kind of class, or, you're trying to fulfill something, but this is really tapping into the lived practice of the knowing and the being in the spaces, or holding space for Black women's history. And so, tell me, what do you think about the responsibility for us to do that? Whose responsibility is it? And your thoughts around the responsibility of that.
Man, well, I think for me, it started out as something that my friend and co-author Mariam Kaba shared the work that she was doing on research on Black women's history in Chicago. And she asked, if I was interested, or who was interested in joining to do some of this work. And so I think the responsibility is less about like a designation and more about a calling. I felt called to do this work, and that was, 8 years ago now. And I didn't know what it was, the feeling that I got in that moment, but I know that I have rarely felt that feeling since. And it was very much a clear, like, you have to do this. And so every single time I feel that you have to do this, now that I'm like older and kind of get an understanding of what that means, is that is a spiritual call. What one of my friends, Skylar Hearn, says is it's an ancestral mandate. And so this work was not only for me, but also was to uplift the lives and legacies of Black women who's, we know about Ida B. Wells, but we also don't know about Carrie Bullock, who was a nursing leader in Chicago. And there's so many women whose names we don't know that were doing so much profound community work in the 20th century. that, and in the 19th century, that deserve their stories to be told and uplifted and preserved. And so that responsibility, I think, really called to me. And it wrapped me up for 8 years. I have been doing work around Black women's history. It started off as a first book that Miriam and I self-published with the help of community and put it out into the world ourselves. And the response was so incredible that we signed a book deal with Haymarket Publishing. The pandemic happened, but in between that, I was doing school talks with that first book. I was doing a bunch of discussions in community at schools and community organizations. Also was doing tours then. And then in 2024, last year, we released that second edition, that second book, basically. It's not just the South Side of Chicago, it's downtown, it's the West Side, and it just expands on the stories. It's pretty much double what that first book was. And so that responsibility has grown and grown and grown and wrapped me up in many different ways. What I learned when I was visiting classrooms was that, young Black children weren't learning Black history. So I did a curriculum. I worked on a curriculum with a curriculum team and developed a standards aligned curriculum for 6 through 12 so that their educators, because many of the educators will say, we don't know this history, we wanted to teach it. So I was like, here's the way, not just the book, but here's a curriculum. And then sometimes the work got challenging. And so that's a whole nother story about how I moved into the documentary filmmaking. So it's been a beautiful journey. And I would say I'm honored to be able to hold that responsibility. Even as this work continues to grow many years later, it is really something that I feel was meant to happen. And I feel just like it enriches me. So it's really reciprocal, It's like I'm telling the stories and the stories are informing how I move through this world as well. So it's just a really beautiful honor to be able to tell the stories and continue to shape media tools and resources that help people understand the impact of these stories today.
Yeah, because symbolic annihilation is real. And so when we don't tell our stories, we know we can be erased into eternity, perpetuity. So with that, I want to ask you, carrying that heavy responsibility, first of all, thank you, because people have callings on their life and folks run from callings, and they follow flesh versus what they purpose to do. And so thank you for saying yes, because you could have been like, no, I don't want to do it. It's too much. So thank you for the sacrifice of that mandate on your life. And so you talked about the women who you are discovering, rediscovering, uplifting. And I know that it tells us how many times people went without recognition. Even though we say Ida B. Wells, everybody knows Ida B. Wells, that wasn't always the case. For many years, her story was buried and she was pitted to be, a bad person, a race instigator, that sort of thing. And she's just now getting street names and all this other stuff. And there's so many women who you lift up who also went without that recognition. So I love for you to tell, like, in today's movement, as we see different movements happening, what do they overlook about legacy? And when we think about legacy, what are movements overlooking as far as Black women?
I'm not sure who's overlooking what, I would say. I think that there are some organizers and organizations that are uplifting these stories in really beautiful ways. I think that what we see happening in this political moment is an intentional erasure, the banning of books, the, literal destruction of databases that refer to race and gender. They are so blatant attacks. Like, it's not secret. It's not something that's hidden. And it's blatant attacks that's taking place to ensure that so many histories aren't being told. And so I think that this is a moment in which we have to dig back into those histories and that we have to pull the text, the resources, all of those things to the forefront. And also we're going to have to find new ways to tell our stories, because if at the federal level, if they have decided that you can't talk about gender, you can't talk about women, the word woman is literally like the word in itself, right? Race, diversity, equality, support, all of these words that reflect like the fact that there are so many community histories that are being suppressed or erased, and also so many communities that are being attacked, violently harmed, right? They don't even want you to say the language that depicts those stories. And so I think that it is so much of our work now to continue to speak the names of those who did so much work, in Chicago, the organizers, the health practitioners, the artists, everyone, right? Like we have to keep referring back to those histories in order to, I would say, get clear on what the mission is. For
Yeah.
me, the work that I've been doing around preserving Black women's history has been about me understanding that what we're experiencing in this moment isn't new, right? We were attacked, we have been attacked throughout history over centuries. And what is it that we do to remain strong in this work? What is it that we do to envision new worlds and new ways of being? I think that that is how the preservation and the historical application of their lives become relevant in this moment. And so it's, for me, it's like a blueprint. I always talk about this work as a blueprint because whenever I feel overwhelmed or upset or confused or like I don't think I can do it, I go to the stories of the women whose lives that I've been able to uplift. And I then, in Lifting as They Climb, there's 80 women. And so I can go to any page of that text and say, okay, I'm feeling challenged about creating more art. I'm feeling a little fearful about telling the truth in this moment, right? Because of the attacks, I'm feeling a little challenged to do this organizing work because it's hard. So I know why a lot of people don't do it. But there are examples of the ways in which Black women have moved through this world and created and shaped despite the lack of resources, despite support, despite the violence. So I think it's more of like our movements just always turning to history, always remembering what we have already been able to build in this moment. And that may get difficult. Sometimes it feels difficult, right? Because you see all the negative things happening in the news and you're like, I literally felt so much depression in the times that I make myself sit down to see what's happening nationally and internationally. It's and locally. But as soon as you do that, you have to pour back into yourself.
Yeah.
Remember that we are not, this is not anything new. This is not an anomaly. That they're they're using the old playbook. Right? So it's not even some new advanced way of people and Black women, brown communities. Like they're doing the same thing. So just turn into history to be like, what are the tools that we need to resurrect and what are the new things we need to use in defense of our lives and ourselves?
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you said they're using old tools, and so Sankofa is real. We have the old tools too, right? Because we survived that. So what worked and what are the new technologies that we can use, bring in? And when I say technologies, I mean, spiritual technology. I mean, all of the technologies, all the new things we can use and pull from. I love the word that you said, like the history and herstory is our blueprint. They give us that guide. And I think you have a blueprint and a framework to how you do your work. It's very rooted in place and space and time. Like even when the tours that you do, it's the streets, the neighborhoods, the landmarks, the buildings, right? Tell me why you feel or why you have implemented so much geography to your work, and why is that so critical for Black women's memory and generational healing that we're reaching for, striving for.
Well, when you read that bio from my 20s, that was pretty much from my 20s. I started as a journalist. And so there's a way in which the questions have always guided me. I have so many people who are like, I said, you ask so many questions. I do, because I'm just like, information is fuel for me. It's like, oh, okay, how can I better understand that? That's why, I'm sitting in front of all of these books. Every room in my house has books. Like there's no surrounded by knowledge. I need to be able to be constantly learning. And I think the work of Lifting as They Climbed really reinserted the fact for me that the land that we are on has stories to tell. Whether the landmarks are there or not, whether they're the homes or whether the families are still there, the land has information for us. And so I realized in researching back in like 2017, when we were working on that first book and I was going to the sites, it occurred to me that I personally have always struggled with history because it's always told through a patriarchal, Eurocentric lens in schools throughout most of my, education. And when I was standing in front of these buildings, it just brought it to life to me in a different way, right? Like when I realized what Black women's hands, hearts, and minds had constructed, their dreams had manifested into, I was so inspired. I was just like, wow. And I could tell also that when I was talking to young people, they too were feeling like history was just this like black and white, predominantly male lens of what has happened in the past. And that's not true. And so to say that, I'm from New Jersey, first, I always say I'm from New Jersey. I grew up in a city called Rahway. And ultimately, when I came to Chicago, I didn't know what it was. After I finished my master's, it was something that told me that I needed to live here. Like I couldn't go to school here and go back to, New Jersey or New York or DC or wherever and say, oh, I lived in Chicago. No, I didn't live there. If I didn't know the communities, if I wasn't a part of the community, if I wasn't contributing in ways or understanding or organizing, then can I really say I live there? And so through understanding like the history of Chicago, it's so much power here. It's so much power here, which is what we see when, Chicago's always moving things forward. Well, we won reparations and so many things have happened here, starting with like historically, like the Black Renaissance in Chicago, the arts Renaissance and things like that. It was like, oh, this space has a story to tell. And then there's a lot of support and I don't know, I know folks may be like not, but there's magic here. There is energy here that is really supportive and loving. I know some people have a different experience with Chicago, but once you're I've been a part of multiple communities. It's a little siloed here, but you make your way through communities and become a part of different, it's like all of these spaces where brilliance is being cultivated and also where you can see the reverberations of history kind of rising to the top. And so to me, it was like, when I'm here and I'm in a particular place that have a certain energy, how can I use that to like, stand in my purpose? How can I use that to connect with Black women and girls? How can I use that to share the storytelling, And so Chicago, in a way, I didn't create any of it here. I'm building on top of it. That's the beautiful part. Like us turning to the land itself, the soil, right? Like us turning to what is possible when you plant seeds. And then also when we're zooming out at a macro level, like what is the infrastructure that has been created here by Black women's, visions? What organizations still exist that were, stewarded by these minds? There's just a lot that you can gain from the geography in itself that then supports how you understand not just history, but your place in this timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. And being here, when you think of because the book that I wrote, Move Beyond the Block, features 18 Black women who were born and raised here in Chicago. And I just think of when we did the tour, and like when you can connect to the very building someone was, raised in, or the Vivian Harsh, and we can go to the Cleveland Hall Library branch and know that Vivian G. Harsh was the first Black woman to run a library here in Chicago. Like when you can connect them, like you taking people on those tours, I think it's one thing to know and hear a story, but then to be in that space. So yeah, that is deep work. Yes, yes, yes. The history was made, but you connecting people today to the space and place. And we know, especially when we think about gentrification and we think about how many buildings are demolished and forgotten. But just to stand on some of that, it's like almost standing on holy ground. So Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it reverberates too. I think it's a cellular thing as well, right? I think it really connects us to, like, you can have had, and it's not always, but I've had really visceral reactions to being in spaces like people who resonate for you. If you go to their birthplaces or go where they spend time, you can feel that. So
You can like Southside Community Arts Center,
yes.
there surrounded by all of that wood that was
Mhm.
touched by, like Gwendolyn Brooks
Yeah.
and like Richard Wright. Like it's just like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
yes, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a different level of inspiration.
Yeah.
And I've never did a tour where people did come away just
Mhm.
like, oh, I understand it in a different way now. Like they
And
understand.
tears.
Yeah.
If there are tears, there's
Yeah.
real reactions.
Yeah.
You're just talking about the Southside Community Arts Center and Dr. Burroughs and all of the artists that have had their work there. And then I think about the YMCA on Wabash and
No.
the fact that that was where Black History Week, which is now Black History Month, that is where that was birthed at. Like, that is incredible to me. And how many um councils stayed in that space, Black people who were, I'm sure, just having conversations just like you and I, like, how do we move forward, how do we fix this, how do we whatever, and not knowing that they were making a generational difference. um I just got just a couple more questions. The next question is really about, you talked about this too. You said you were a part of communities and Chicago being a community. And yes, y'all, everybody who's watching, you already know I am biased. Chicago all day, every day, Chicago over everybody. Um, but the thing I love about Chicago, and especially Chicago Black women, is we rule. We When we move something and we really give it all, it's for the global betterment, right? It's not just for Chicago, which is why it makes me so proud to be from Chicago. But you talked about community, and we know, as people who consider themselves progressive or liberal, as they gain this information and we share the information, there's always and I don't want to speak in a way, I like to keep the context positive, but we do know there's a risk, right? There's a risk of co-option when we start to share our work and when we start to amplify, then people start looking over here, and then, here they come. So my question is, how has it been, or has there been some questions that you've had to grapple with? And I know you can't speak for Mariam, but, like, have you all grappled with the ethical, like how do we get around, like, the extraction of our culture, for the white gaze, or for, this broader gaze outside of, as you talked about, the Black children who we want to have this information, our own communal healing, generational knowledge. How do we balance that?
Excuse me, everybody. I have a cold, so I got my tea. Um, yeah, there has been moments, there's this particular historian that, used some facts out of our book, and I knew that, these were some stories that, Miriam and I had unearthed that hadn't been previously published. And
Mm,
so, for them to say it without, like, saying, like, where they pulled it, they said it as though they found this research. And, I think it would be an ego thing to be like, well, they should have credited us for the, because it's just like this history is ours, right? It's ours. And the women's lives that we're speaking to in this book, this is just our of their lives. Their lives are so much more expanded.
mhm, mhm,
There's so much more to be told. And so it is just, it's not about like who's trying to take it or claim it, right? Like it's like, how can young people hear these stories? I don't care if it was, any kind of person that's saying it, they could say it as if it's theirs. This was never about, for me and for Miriam, this was never about like how we get rich. How do we like make our names well known? And like, I think that's like a byproduct, right? Like
yeah,
people know now, this has been my work for so many years, but
mhm,
it's not the purpose behind it.
mhm,
Right? So it really is, to me, relatively irrelevant who tries to use or reclaim or twist the history. The they can try to tell lies all they want. They could try to say the Underground Railroad wasn't the Underground. Like, history is history. The truth is the truth. Like, there's no need to go back and forth or try to contend with liars or try to contend with those who have a white supremacist lens that is desiring to minimize our contributions. Our contributions are there regardless of who tells them, right? Had we not wrote this book, these women's lives are still their lives. They still built Chicago. They still built the city. We have had an impact. There's no way to pretend. You can pretend, but for so long, but you can tell people want to know the truth. Like, even in this moment of mass lying and complete just the length of like complete insane indoctrination, right? Like, where people are just trying to tell a new version. It's just, you're just trying to cover up some inadequacies. You're feeling a way about how powerful Black people are, regardless of what the obstacles were, right? Like, that has nothing to do with us. What we have to do is learn the histories, like, if you loved Ida B. Wells so much, it's not just reading the little snippet we have in here. You read her entire biography, right? Like, you read about their lives, you learn about who they are, regardless of who says what, So I think that it really is trying to just block out the noise and the static a lot of times and learn, keep learning and learning and learning. And that, to me, offsets some of the attempts to obstruct our histories and our stories. Because even after this whole political moment comes and goes, right, we still have the opportunity to continue to tell our stories in new ways. That's why I chose documentary, because I was like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can burn this book, tear it up, light it on fire in Federal Square, right? The stories still prevail, right? There's so many books that tell these stories. We pulled this from, we had sources, books, sites, different things. Like, it still exists, And so to delve into filmmaking, to me, was like, okay, they can't, unless they delete the internet, the film is going to exist, right? Unless you completely remove everybody's access to, digital devices, these stories will persist. And so, off of social media, I know, like, the whole archive isn't on social media. Film that I created was also not just about the history that was, but the Black women who are continuing that work today. So many women have risen up and been inspired by these historical references and said, this is my contribution. This is the way I want us to understand classical music. Margaret Allison created so many compositions, and she was such an artist and a pianist. But, there are women in this city who are like, I'm creating as well. And I'm using that inspiration to help people understand our impact in this genre, put my own spin on it, So they can't, no one can erase us. No one can erase us. No one can minimize us when we know who we are and we know where we've been and what we've done.
Thank you for that. I needed to hear that. That's a balm for my spirit, because I just, where we are politically, where we are globally, and the very real forces that are intentionally trying to erase us. You have to remember, like, they can't, like, is what scripture, what days no man can take under. Holding on to that. I wanted to put a pin in some things that you said and make sure we came back to them. So, one, cite Black women. I'm not taking credit, but cite Black women. Give them their just due. Especially if you're just telling a story and you just like, oh, I found, but if you citing and you're presenting the information and something that you found out and learned, this is what you do. You give credit, you cite your sources, cite Black women. Shouts out to Christine A. Smith and Cite Black Women Movement. If you are quoting, going around, if that book inspired you and you learned something, tell people, like, this was the source I got this information from. It doesn't take away you being a historian. Essence and Miriam had to look up their facts too. They had to research as well. So just cite your sources, cite Black women. That's one. Two, you said something earlier, and it was in your bio about Daytona Beach and you working for that newspaper. Like, I just want to fan out and geek out real quick because when I saw that, all I was thinking was like, Mary McLeod Bethune. You know, I was thinking about Zora Hurston. I was like, gosh, you were in that space, like day to day in that space that they occupied, that region, that whole thing, and thinking the work you were doing as a journalist and a storyteller at that time, how powerful that must have been for you. So I was just my own like, oh, that's like, gosh, vicariously living through your memories.
Girl, let me tell you, I went to Bethune-Cookman University.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. That was
Oh,
where I got my bachelor's degree, and I spent my early years.
I didn't know that. That wasn't in the bio. That needs
That
to be.
wasn't in the bio, because that was it's the little lady. That's my late 20s, early 30s bio. But it didn't. Oh my gosh, it didn't. It doesn't hit you then. Like it was like, oh, I'm in this school. I had to go to because the city that I lived in was half. We had like half and half, but I really just wanted to be immersed in African American culture, life, Blackness. I wanted to be wrapped up in it. And Bethune, oh, what an incredible experience to have went to that school. Like the people I met, also the way they honor her legacy. Like it's not just like, I think there's some school you be named after someone and people in that building don't even know who they are. Jones College Prep, like places like that, right? Like you'd be like, oh, who's that? What is this about? But Cookman, we read, her autobiography. We read her work. We learned about her life. We learned about her life because it was really important for us to know how we were able to get there. Like we came to school, but Mary McLeod Bethune, started that school with like $1.50, right? Now where I am now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, in the way that her name comes up in these archives, the stories that I'm able to learn. I stayed in Joyner Hall, and I did not, and Marjorie Stewart Joyner is inside of Lifting as They Climb. And it wasn't until I wrote this book that I was like, oh, I was in Joyner Hall like as a freshman and didn't know that this was a incredible philanthropist and inventor, someone who worked very closely with Mary McLeod Bethune.
What's her name again? Speak her name again.
Marjorie Stewart Joyner.
Marjorie Stewart Joyner. Okay.
Yeah. And I had no idea how powerful she was, right? Like, and I'm in the dorm. And so the history just came back around, it came back around. But the storyteller has always been a part of my life. I started out at Bethune-Cookman. I became the editor of the newspaper there, and then was really on a journalism track. So, doing my internships at the Daytona Beach News Journal, then going and doing this summer with the Afro-American newspaper in DC, where I was telling Black women's stories. It didn't like it just.
It was your path.
Connected the dots, because it's so easy to just the years blur past and the work keeps coming in the projects, and I just forget like how much of where I started is a part of where I am today, and that is very much tied to Black women's brilliance, power, influence, creativity. That is all a part of my history, in that storytelling piece. I've always been a storyteller, and so it's just been really beautiful, especially right now as the new year starts, to kind of reflect on some of those things. It's been a year.
2025 was not a joke at all. Like,
well, I'm sick now. Like, I'm just exhausted, and to recalibrate and to re-energize myself, to remember where I've been and who has been a part of that story. It's been incredible. Even doing work with Miriam, like she's also a friend and an inspiration. And as I continue to do the work, I realize how hard it is. I started organizing again, and I'm like,
and because also, right, organizing, what people don't understand is many of us who, in any way, if you are any way, even just a small way, consider yourself organized or step into organizing spaces, we are those who are avengers, right? Most of us are the divergents. We're the ones that's calling out, calling up, really moving and moving against mainstream traditional ways. And so a lot of that brings a whole lot of other things that we have to take into our bodies. And I'm sure you can attest to this when you are thinking of our historical ancestors and some of the things that took them away from us at early ages, right? Cancer, kidney failures, all these things that we know. I mean, not medically speaking, but we know a lot of it is emotional stress induced illnesses that have taken them. And so we know this work is not for the faint of heart. And even more to that, a lot of us are ignoring or pushing the can down the road, our own health issues and mental issues as well. So we come burdened with a whole bunch of trauma, un, 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 unrecognized, unacknowledged trauma. And so we cutting and stabbing and bleeding, but fighting the way out. And in the meantime, it's a lot of harm and hurt inside of organizing spaces.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah.
Girl, don't yeah, like turning so there's a way in which we can turn to history and say, like, I'm inspired and I want to recreate or build on top. And then there's also ways that you look at history and you got to say, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. And, when you care about our communities, when you care about what's happening to us, when you care about what resources we have to defend ourselves or to survive this moment, it's easy to just pour out, pour out, pour out, and not be like, what's going on, And it is my absolute commitment. I don't want to say too much about my organizing work because I want it to heal and shape itself. But what I will say is that I'm not organizing without healing at the center. And as I've done a ton of research around, specifically, I did some research around like Black feminist orgs and like what was not only the work that they did and what they were able to accomplish during the time that they were together, but what was the rupture point? And a lot of that, it goes back to healing. It goes back to whether we are well within ourselves and our individual internal wellness is connected to how we respond to external factors and how we connect or, our relationships are disrupted, right?
I
Like
wish y'all could see this heels. Oh my God, goosebumps all over.
Girl, it's like it's all connected. It all goes back. And as I am trying to put healing at the foundation of organizing work, I'm recognizing this is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
This is like, it would be so much easier for me to be like, all right, y'all, I'm organizing with Black women. Like, let's go. Let's just let's address this. Let's pick some issues in our community. Let's do some campaigns without first saying like, are you well?
And not only are you well, are you sure, my dear?
Are you sure, my dear?
That you want to be well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Because I asked that question and it has broken my heart, It has broken my heart for some folks to say yes, and then they're not. And then they're like, I'm like, but you just said that you, and then I'm like, well, the heartbreak is also just a lesson for myself because there are moments where I'm like, I want to be well, and then I'm crashing out, right? Like I'm completely overworking, I'm over functioning. I have to go back to my commitment of well-being, of healing, right? And use the tools and create new ways to be engaged in my healing. But it hurts when I think all of us are not able to do that, for circumstances, for internal, mental, emotional ruptures, right? Like it's probably the hardest thing any of us will ever do, be well and to be working on our healing. Like that's why we have so many more accomplishments, but the healing piece be at the bottom of the list.
At the bottom.
It's an ongoing struggle. It's a struggle. And doing it in a collective space, saying that I'm back to organizing, but I am not organizing without healing at the forefront, in the middle, at the nucleus of what it is we're trying to build, because I recognize that to me has been our Achilles heel all along,
Whew. we can go so deeper, and I'm not gonna keep holding you, but that's an even
Okay.
deeper
I have time for
conversation.
this. I
Oh,
have time.
oh, good, because women's good. Because here's the thing, right? I think also another thing is you gotta, the one thing you have to let get very sick and die is ego, right? In first of all, period, just to get through life and be of use to anybody, not just yourself, but your family, your community, anything and anybody, you have to let ego die. I think that one, we are not clear about what healing even necessitates. What does it take to for healing to happen? And when healing, how do you even know when you're healing, right? You don't know if you aren't in the business of prioritizing healing. So many of us believe that if we just get a sound bowl in the room, we healing. No, like, you know what I mean? It's so deeper. But one thing I will say is this, and I want people, Essence and I just kind of knock on wood, we're quoting the same thing at the same time. I want to give people some books and some tools. That was from Tony K. Bambara's The Salt Eaters book. So if you haven't read that, you need to have that in your arsenal. You talked about stories. The thing that I want us to know is that everything wasn't always peaches and cream and roses with our ancestors, right? We know Maya Angelou and Maya Angelou's Pieces of Me documentary. It was hers, Pieces of Me, or Toni
That
Morrison?
was Toni Morrison.
Okay, Toni Morrison's was Pieces of Me, and I think Maya Angelou was Still I Rise. Rita Colborn Wack did that one. But in Maya Angelou, her son Guy talked about how, and I don't want to say the name of the person wrong, but another ancestor was upset and pretty much tried to blackball and block, like gatekeep, Dr. Maya Angelou from certain things that she would have, and like basically crapped all over her, and then had to eat crow when Maya Angelou surpassed her, and asked her to stand in from her. And Maya Angelou had never, spoke ill of this woman, had never. But those stories we need to know, because we need to know, like, yes, there will be conflict. Ida B. Wells talks about her and Mary McLeod Bethune, and some of the ways that they were behaving with each other. And this is why I think that it is great to read autobiographies too, so you can see people's, like, we all want to see the moment. We see Angela Davis and we all just think of this. We don't know the interactions. And if we take the time to really go beyond clips, quotes, and moments, we'll see the fullness. And I think that'll give us some healing, some ways forward in our healing. Because the first thing we need to do is to be able to, one, see it, but see the reflection, so we can say, that was me the other day in that meeting, talking crazy and being messy. Or that was me, whatever you did, you can see yourself and you can be like, I don't have to be this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. And the other thing is, what am I needing, right? What am I needing? Why am I showing up like this? What am I needing? And if it is that you are alone or feel alone, or if it is that you are dealing with some past trauma and you're triggered, whatever it is, I think it's more than a sound bowl moment. We really have to do the inner work, the reflection. There's a new, it's not new, but I just learned about it, or I'm really digging into this neuroplasticity, and this reshaping our brain and the patterns of our brain, and how we do that. So many people always tell you, your brain cells, once you kill those, you can't get them back, and that and the other, but you can reshape brain patterns. And I think we a lot of us need to be understanding of, like, neuroscience and the brain and what's triggered and what we need, whether it's oxytocin, whether we got too much cortisol, whatever it is, like healing has to be for real, for real. And Essence, I'm gonna tell you, I was telling you that for those of you who don't know, you may see this at a later date, but this is recorded in the middle of December. But beginning in November, I created a neuroplasticity workbook for myself for daily practices. This I've been on this trip for a minute, because not a minute, but a month, because I can't be good to anybody if I'm not good. And like you said, why tire you out in organizing, or everybody else? Why make it a space of tension and contrition, and like, why make it that? Why not make it, if we're trying to get free, why not make our journey as liberative and reparative and restorative as the future we're fighting for?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the core of it, introspection, and introspection takes place in silence. A lot
Mhm.
of us are really connected to our screens nonstop, and and then when we think about what it is that we need to do, it's like, oh, like, let me go into community, use community organizing as the panacea for some things that I'm not willing to sit with. Like, what is going on? It's been so many times I'm like, and some people even know what's going on, but like, we'll just keep shuffling it down, or pushing it away. Like, you really have to be able to sit with yourself and assess what it is that you're doing. I too have been doing a reflection document, for my birthday is in January. So it also, January, December is always like, okay, okay. But one of the questions that I thought was so profound was, reflect on the things that you did this year and ask yourself, am I doing that for me? Or am I doing that for community? Am I doing it for family? Like, who am I doing these things for? Because I think a lot of times you think that it's you, just like, I'm doing this, this, this. And it's like, but what are you doing for you? For And what feels broken or hurt or tender, and it's not on a woo woo, but like, really a lot of this, like, the broken ruptures within yourself manifest as your issues with other people,
It's
and being unwilling to really do that labor that it takes, the emotional labor that it takes for yourself, for yourself. You know, I mean, I think it's a societal, like, capitalistic thing to just produce, produce, and go and go and go without spending time with you and really understanding your motivations and really understanding, man, we are one mind. What is it that you need? What is it that you need? And it is organizing the answers. Is being in community really the answer? Or do you need to address some things before that step, right? Or do you need to, like, work on some things or mend some relationships? Or, like, there's just it's endless. It's not, not one of the, like, it's not the sound bowl healing or the yoga. Those are
important.
those are like resources that can help you get there. But the real thing is sitting with yourself, introspective, spend as much time being introspective and clear about who you are and what you need and what's going on with you as you are about the to-do list and the goals and the this and that and the social medias and the posting and all of that. Like, check in with you a lot. I don't have all the answers at all. I'm recognizing that in creating a space where healing is at the center of organizing, that I'm having to turn to this collective to say, like, what do we need? And what does it look like individually? And then what does it look like collectively? And I'm like, I'm shocked in many ways, because I'm like, a lot of times we'd be like, oh, this is easy. We got a critique of what's happening. We have a critique of movement work. We have a critique of what the president is doing, and but you're not realizing, like, what it really takes to change things, to shape, to move forward, to construct in community, to build in community. It's a lot. It's a lot,
And where are we putting that?
It's going to be even harder,
And the question is also, where are we putting that? Because every time we face something that we want to change, that we are exchanging energy with that. And where do we put that? Where do we put that anger? Where do we put that rage? Where do we put that disappointment? Where do we put that I'm disenchanted today? Where do we put that I'm heartbroken because I didn't saw this algorithm came across and I see babies dying? And like, where are you putting that? And if you and the other thing you talked about is sitting with yourself. And I think that's why so many people had such a hard time during the quarantine, during the pandemic quarantine, because people cannot sit with themselves.
At
And they were
all.
so ready to get back. I can't stand it. Why do we have to put on your mask so we can go outside? For the love of God, get vaccinated. We need to be back outside. I'm like, sit your ass down.
Yeah.
Mask or whatever you got on, sit down.
Yeah. They created the perfect poison for us. I had a friend who would say, social media is like cigarettes, right? Like just at any moment, just spend hours and hours and hours and hours doing everything but understanding what's happening here and here, here and here. There needs to literally be classes like, come sit with yourself. What does introspection look like? Like spaces where we kind of investigate that, not just in the doing, right? Like I think a lot of it is doing, like, let's do this together. How about we just sit?
Just sit down.
Some time figuring out what's coming up, Yeah. I know a lot of people have tons of ideas about what healing can look like, but it really starts with the self, and not in an individualistic way, but like in a way that matters so much,
And the preservation, like to preserve yourself, it matters. Shouts out Trisha Hersey, the Nat Bishop. Like, rest is our only way out of here. And resting is you sitting with yourself. And you'd be surprised how many people push back against her. How you gonna sit down when you like it's the only way. So yeah, we could sit here all day with that one, but
we're in the season. It's December,
Yeah.
and the season change really necessitates that we ground and get clear and spend some time, not always doing the external things, do some of that internal organizing, organize the internal self, like what would that look like?
Even cleaning your space, right? Decluttering is also a part of that. Like how, and I'll move us to the next point, but just knowing how your body processes things, knowing the physiological part of your body, knowing what you're breathing in each day, knowing like your feng shui. People think this is all pie in the sky, kind of like head thinking, but it's real. Like the energy around you. How are you feeling in your spaces? Are you paying attention to your body? There was one person talking about organizing work. There's one person who's from a community organizing, I don't know, but whatever. And I will never forget, we were outside and she walked up and I just did a deep, and she was like, "Oh, that was something she said about the breath." And I didn't realize that she had like, I was like, is she like, that was what kind of thing. And she caught it. I don't think she knew that it was in response to her, but I had to then ask myself, like, what's your relationship with her? Like, what is happening when she's in spaces with you?
Yeah.
And so that's for anybody. Like I noticed that certain spaces, certain places around the city, when I'm driving through, I notice me being tensed up, going through certain neighborhoods or do past certain sites where something might have happened. I don't think those are the things you're talking about. Just being retrospective and sitting with and knowing, so that you do know, oh, I held my breath. I was holding my breath. I wasn't even breathing. So at least you understand. I think too many of us aren't even aware of ourselves, that we can't even say like, or even catch ourselves when we do. Like, I know for me, I'm a Virgo. And some people be like, what did that have to do with anything? Whatever. I believe in it. So, but I know my first instinct is to snap, like to get you together. And I have to remember for myself, like, everything somebody says, treat it as if they have the same intentions that you have. And if your intentions are bad or whatever your intentions are, that's how you responded to folks. So then I have to ask myself, well, why you? thinking that person thinking like that. You know what I mean? Doing that kind of self-reflection. I think, especially in organizing places when so much of what we do is in response to other people, we do need to do that. So thank you for that. I'm gonna get us up out of here. I do want to ask you, and I think you kind of talked about this, but when you think about, you talked about working with Black children and this work being so important, and when you think about like future generations and when they look back on this time right now, and before us, but what are you hoping that they like take with them from um how Black women organize, how we care for one another, and how we persevere?
That's a really big question. You should say me.
But I think we just answered it though, right?
Yeah, it's definitely connected to, I think, how, what I recognize in the research I've done, for the text, or even just my own research, like living my lived experience, that we are better when we are connected to each other, that, I would not be here to have this conversation with you had it not been for the Black women in my life that check on me, that also be like, but you said, like I have one friend who really, I'm over functioning, as I said, like a lot of many Black women are, right? Like we're just doing the most and having to say, like, is this actually what I need to be doing? How do I check in with myself? And also have people around me who are like, did you ask other people to hold those things, right? How am I in my community? How am I connected in this community? How am I asking for support and asking for help? When I think about, the women in the book, a lot of them were connected to each other. There's this project, Miriam had did a talk one time when she came back into town, and she did a bit of a map, and it was like overlapping circles when this woman was connected. Ida B. Wells was connected to Melissa Elam. Ida B. Wells was connected to Mary Richardson Jones. Like they were connected to each other. And the reason why I got back into organizing after taking many years off was because I recognized, like, I can't be in this moment by myself. I can't be experiencing the attacks. I can't be watching overlapping genocides and then just be a solo, like, just go in the community, go to an event and then go home. Like I need to be deeply connected to the communities around me. I need to literally have a sisterhood around me, mentors around me that I'm reaching out to, that I'm communicating with, because that is our superpower. None of these women did anything by themselves. Like it really, and I used to dislike that, right? Like I used to be like, well, I could, I could do it. I could do it. How I'm gonna do it? Well, I went through something earlier this year, and one of the things I had, one of my mentors said, and she said, oh, you could do it, but how are you gonna show up? What is it gonna look like? You gonna like what does it look like when you get there, right? Like you're gonna be just like tore down, right? Energy, right? I need people around. I need Black women around me. I need my community around me, so that I don't fall apart in this moment. So that I can remember that we can build something so much more gorgeous than this. This empire is going to collapse. Is in the process of collapsing, right? That we have community around us, not in a hypothetical sense, not in the, oh, you just hug these people, but you really don't know how they are. Like the people you're connected to, that's one of our lessons from the pandemic. You had to build pods. You had to be like, okay, I don't want to be going crazy in my house alone the whole time, right? How am I showing up in a community that is there for me and I am there for them? I think that's the historical thing. You can't, when you read in these stories, they're connected to each other, in ways, whether that's healthy or unhealthy. That's our job, to work on the healing piece. But I can't do any of this. And in past generations look at me, it's less about, I feel even emotional saying it, it's less about what I did and all that I accomplished. It's more about like what, am I okay? Am I loving? Do I exert loving energy? When you see me doing this work, do you feel included? Right? I want it to be less about what I did, but who I am and how I am, that's where I'm at right now in my life. You know, maybe later down the line, my legacy in my 70s and 80s, it'll be like what I did. But like right now, it's like, how do I show up? You know, and how am I making sure that I am well, so I treat people well, and so that I can build things and I can create things with others. Um, I just started an organization in the last couple of years, Kim to You Arts and Media, and being a founder, which you know,
Mhm.
just I had to rise when I'm hiring people to work with me. I have to rise in a different way. I have to communicate in a different way. I have to be loving because the people that I think about when I think about the epitome of like Black womanhood and like community, I think about like women like Beth Ritchie. She's
Mm.
so loving. She's so loving. I feel so loved by her, even if it's just a little couple sentences on the side.
Mhm.
That's who, when I think about like, how do I evolve? How do I become? I think about women like that. Tracy, oh, like, love
Yes.
me. Like people who are like, we got what you know, like, let's talk like
Mhm.
that much. Like, that is what
Mhm.
that is what we need to embody. You know, yes, the work, yes, the labor, all of those things,
Yeah.
all of those things. But who you are, how you show up in the moments of rupture, in the moment where the nation is on fire,
Mhm.
destruction and pain, how are you going to make it through? And I know that you make it through by healing, and I know that you make it through by deeply connecting and being in right relationship with others, especially
Mm.
Black women.
Right relationships. I love that. And you touched on something. Um, and so yes, our 70s and 80s can look back and say, I did that. I did do that, didn't I? But I also want us to also use even in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I'll say more 40s and 50s because we got a little living to do. But I think like reading your bio back to you and you like, oh wow, like I think that that's a helpful tool too, right? Because when we think back to who we were at that time, it also helps us too. I was young, I was optimistic, I was, I had this hope, and you become disenchanted and disillusioned, and sometimes you got to tap back into that youthful, not naivete, right? But definitely that youthful zeal and that hope. Sometimes we got to go back to who was I then. I even do that with my husband and I. We've been together 30 years. I have to also think back like, ooh, who was that little young girl that was in love with that little shorty? Like, how did I present myself to him then when I wanted him to want me constantly, like instead of taking it for granted. So I think we also have to think back of when you say the work we're doing now, how we show up. Yeah, how are you showing up? Because if you're showing up jaded, if you're showing up like who gonna save the world? It's on my shoulders, kind of thing. Versus like, I want to be a part of the solution with everybody. It's just a different energy. So,
Yeah.
I would invite you and myself and all of us who are listening to, look back over our lives and where we are and what we have accomplished, and think about who. And sometimes we weren't showing up the right way. Sometimes we did that. We something came out of it and we like, I don't know how y'all got that because I was going through. But at least giving ourselves time to honor that person that came through it, and allowing that person to one, either usher us to where we need to be, or go back and tell her, look what you did, you came through it, look where we are now. you
Yes.
know
Yeah.
that thing. So
Yeah. And I also want to say, I think it's important too to keep dreaming.
yeah.
Just keep dreaming. Just keep, like, it could look really bad and bleak, and it could get depressing if you got your phone in your hand all day. Like if you scrolling through that timeline or absorbing what's taking place only, like there are ways that we can just keep dreaming and imagining, and then using that to create, just to create and to build things that don't exist, and to build art that you feel called to do. Like I think it looks bad, it is bad. Nobody, I'm not going to downplay it's bad, right?
Yes.
But within you there are infinite possibilities. You are the embodiment of
Mhm.
infinite possibilities, and you can dream beyond this, and you can create beyond this moment. And so I would say just keep dreaming, y'all. Like just keep dreaming of something different. trying new things, imagining new ways, and then creating new ways, you know. That is where I find the most power, you know. Our power lies in what we see beyond this moment.
Yep. Yep. Last question. Now I'm gonna let you get snuggled in some cozy stuff and drink your hot toddy, your tea, and your herb, and shut it down. Look, I'm so glad I got the last. I'm glad I was squeezed in. Thank you. But you talked about dreaming and continue to dream. Who would you say is showing up in your dreams more frequently these days? What ancestor is guiding you right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, wow. Oh, that's a hard one. I always be like, oh no, don't leave anybody out. Hmm. Mm. You know what? I have to I have to say Tony K. Bambara. I have to say
Same.
Bambara. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, she's the reason why I went back into organizing the way that I did. And also, you know, she was not just a writer, she also became a filmmaker. She
Documentary,
got, you know,
yes.
like she just,
Anthropologist,
yeah,
yes.
she's just like a brilliant mind. And but she helped me start thinking a little bit differently. Like I say some things, but what am I really about? You know, if I say I love myself, like how do I love myself? Like what is the representations of my love for myself,
Mhm.
my body, my wellness, you know, whether I'm tired or not, you know, whether I'm going to the doctor or not. You know, like she did it was like a reflection back. Like
Yeah.
wasn't just inspired by her work and her legacy that she left behind. She made me think, mm, there's some things that I still have to work on, you know, and there's some
Yeah.
things that I say I'm
Mm.
about, but
Yeah.
my actions aren't aligning, you
Yeah.
know. And she also had me asking those around me, you know, are you sure you want to be well? And that helped me calibrate, right? Like, if you
Mhm.
are we, do I really need to be, you know, as close, you know, if you're really not ready, like, I want to be
Mhm.
around people who are really ready to be well.
Yeah.
And that feels nourishing, you know, because it helps me be well. So just all due honor and love and light to talk the spirit and ancestor.
Yes.
And
That's Tony K. Bambera. Same with me right now. I'm reading again The Salt Eaters.
which isn't an easy text. It's not an easy,
You gotta
especially,
keep
but
going back and going back and
yeah.
releasing. So reading that right now again, and also like tapping into, just like you said, like I'm writing my first short. 2025 has been brutal, like you said, and I couldn't I unlike you, like you said, you had to go back outside and to organize it, and I was like, I'm done. I have to, like, but it wasn't in a healthy way. It was running from. It was like I had to realize through Tony K. Bambera that I was really um um PTSD. I didn't know I was. And I was like trying to cocoon myself from, like, detaching. Like I would zone out to all the mindless stuff in the world. It just was overwhelming. And I couldn't creatively, I couldn't do anything. And then, like a light, reading her work, and I don't know what amplified her for me in this season, because the book been on my shelf for years. I don't know what made me go back, but I was like, I just got to create creative book, and just stuff, just like this podcast, like relaunching the podcast. I'm doing a short film, all of this stuff, and it's like you called out of the night to write and produce and create. And so, yeah, something about her spirit right now. I don't know. Something about wherever she is in the stars, I think is really prominent right now. And so we are grateful for her spirit and for her memory and for the legacy she left behind. And we are also very grateful for Essence McDowell and the work that you do. We are extremely indebted to you, because this work will not just be for this time, this moment right now. This will be for generations to come. I use your text and your documentary in my work with my girls. And I know there are schools and education centers. And as we talk about the empire falling, we know that our education system will also do a complete unhauling, rehauling, whatever. And we must have our curriculum and our praxis at the center of it. So I thank you for your work. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes to yourself.
Thank you so much. I mean, I reflect back to you when you reached out. I was so excited because all the work that you're doing is vital and needed and necessary, you know. And I know that the healing has to take place alongside all the labor, you know, that it does. But I see you uplifting these Black girls and just making sure they have what they need. And I'm really grateful for you. And I hope that in this new year, you also have what you need, you know.
I'm receiving that.
Yes, yes, and thank you so much for having me and and for you continuing this work as well. Like it's, you know, I think if you realize like it's no lack of space for us to do what must be done.
Yeah.
I see you doing that, and I see you doing it in such a beautiful way and honoring the legacy, the lives of Black women and girls as well as the future. You know, because they need us. They need us so much, and we need them. We need
Yeah.
them to remember and to imagine and to tap into that youthful playfulness. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm just so grateful to see you doing that work. And also, I am always here when you like, if you need anything, I'm here, you know, because I just see what you're doing and it's just so, so valuable and so necessary. So thank you so much for what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Much, much love, Essence McDowell. The book, the first book, Lifting as They Climb.
Is Lifting as They Climb, mapping history of Black women on the South Side, but you can't get that copy unless you know, it's like
That green book, I got it.
you
Y'all
got
can
some
get
people have it. Yes, there's some, and I might have a little 1 or 2 copies left, but
it.
it's Lifting as They Climb, mapping a history of trailblazing Black women in Chicago.
Hmm.
Yeah, in the documentaries Invisible Giants. I'm upcoming this year. I'm doing some schools, going back into schools, doing some school talks, and some work in the Chicago public school system. And yeah, I'm wanting to do more dreaming and more play this upcoming
And,
year.
and if people want to connect with you in any way, what's the best place they can find you? Instagram, LinkedIn?
Um, I'm on all the platforms. Essence McDowell on all the platforms. My
No. Instagram, you create something, right? So,
Oh yes, my Instagram. Yes, my Instagram is created to write with the
okay.
number 2.
Yeah.
Harkening back to my origins of being a writer. So yes, please, Essence McDowell on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Created to Write on Instagram. Follow me for more updates about the things that are to come in 2026.
Thank y'all for tuning in. Follow Essence and get into this spiritual healing of knowing and holding space for Black women, ancestors, and history. Thank y'all. Peace.